Hello, my name is Michael Benson, also known as Squid on the Base, and I am doing an analysis piece for Jayne's contest regarding amateur Overwatch coaching and analysis for his stream, featuring the Dallas Fuels defense of Hanamura Point A versus the Philadelphia Fusion. I will say, unfortunately, I'm not going to be available on Saturday for the stream, so for me, this is more of a chance to get some practice and hopefully get some feedback from the man himself about my thought process, my analysis here, or just whether I'm being stupid or not. I will say I was also interested at taking a look into this one because I'm a Fusion fan and seeing it was heartbreaking, but also pretty cool because you can see very noticeably the impact that Arrow has had on Fuel's team as far as planning strategies and specifically planning strategies against the opponent. One of the biggest things that I found from this composition, which I'll talk about in a minute, is that everything that Fuel does on this map, on this defense, and actually including their offense as well in round one, was they had not only compositions but strategies that directly counter or take away the advantage of compositions that they know Philadelphia Fusion is going to run. Philadelphia Fusion has basically always run dive on attack on this point, and there's basically two compositions that they run on defense, but I won't talk about those because we're just talking about Fuel's defense here. And Fusion is opting to go for the double sniper attack, at least initially here on this point, which we kind of know that they're going to be running some form of dive, and they've been running a lot of double sniper, specifically this stage, considering the impact of Brigitte and knowing that Mickey will be in, which means there's a good chance Mickey will be on the Brigitte. So Fuel pulls out this really interesting comp that I don't think we've seen a lot of, but I think it's an incredibly interesting one specifically for Hanamura Point A. So you have a Reinhardt and Diva tank duo. You're running solo DPS Taimu on the Widowmaker, and then you're running triple support where you have Mercy, Zenyatta, and Brigitte, but they're not actually going to be playing in kind of like the traditional ways that we expect to see as far as tank duos and the like. What's going to happen is you're going to have basically Reinhardt. Sorry, I don't have Stat Banana's fancy stuff. You're basically always going to have Reinhardt and Brigitte as your front line in this composition, where they're looking to specifically pressure this choke. Sorry, my tablet is pretty ass as well. So Reinhardt and Brigitte will be playing together, and then you're going to have Zenyatta and Widowmaker, who's just like right back here in the corner, playing back on this wooded section in the back corner here. And then you're going to have Seagull specifically on the high ground up here. Excuse me, that should be a D, not an S. So Diva will be up here, and Mercy can kind of float around to here, to across as needed. So you basically kind of have you have a dedicated front line in your Reinhardt and your Brigitte. You have a dedicated back line in the Zenyatta and the Widowmaker, and then you have two people that can kind of float as necessary in the Diva and in the Mercy. So I'm just gonna let me close out of this and actually bring this up on Stat Banana and draw this again. So we're gonna have there we go. Rhine, Brig, Zenyatta, Widowmaker, Diva, and then I'll just circle Mercy because Mercy floats. And this is a composition that is specifically suited to countering not only Philadelphia's dive, but especially mitigate Philadelphia's double sniper dive. Because what you look at is that Philadelphia Fusion is basically looking for in this composition to have either Widowmaker or Hanzo land a shot on somebody from the enemy team that isn't a tank, so any of the 200, 250 HP targets, and then dive them, take them out, snowball the rest of the fight and your 6v5 advantage, and then capture the point. So they're going for a fight win here specifically. And it doesn't even need to be a Hanzo or Widowmaker. Yeah, Hanzo or Widowmaker headshot. It just needs to be a body shot and enough that you can basically go and burst that town quickly after. But what happens here is that the way that Dallas Fuel specifically is positioned basically completely mitigates that ability. So the when you look at specifically if you have snipers set up in the choke here, so we'll say Widow, or there's the high ground right behind choke down here. The only people that they can really see from that position are the Reinhardt and the Brigitte that both have shields. So you've already basically taken away the value of one of those snipers. So the other thing that you commonly see is you'll have one of the snipers try to move up to either the location up here or they can go up to the platform here. And this is where Seagull comes in, whereas Seagull has the defense matrix that he can use here and basically make this non-existent for at least a few seconds, enough time that if they need to, both Taimu and Unko can rotate back to a safe position here and not be vulnerable to sniper fire. And D.Va can also obviously boost people off and make them not be a thing anymore. So they've mitigated the impact of snipers. But the other really interesting thing about this is that the way that there's basically two diveable targets in this composition, which is the Zenyatta and the Widowmaker if she's used grapple. But they're both playing in positions where, and this is where the front line comes in, they're both playing in positions where the tanks from Fusion will either need to go through room here and then come on them directly just by pressing the W key, or they'll have to actually move in here and then jump over using mobility and land on them. But in doing so, they have to actually go through Mickey's Brigitte and the Reinhardt. So there's a strong front line, and also Seagull can rotate and help out with that as well. So there's a strong frontline presence that is preventing the actual dive from Fusion being able to get to a location where it can dive those two people. So what happens here is really the only avenue that they leave for Fusion to take is either they can try to jump over and just go to point, or they can try to go up. And you see them do this a couple times. Fusion will try to come up through this left window here and then go around coast to the point. And what this does is this gives time for, once again, for Dallas's team to reposition in such a way that your Widowmaker and your Zenyatta are not vulnerable, and you have time for the Ryan and Brigitte and the D.Va to go and actually take that frontline fight, which is something that favors the composition that they're running right now. Basically, if Fusion tanks or if Fusion decides that they're just going to try to fight on point, they're going to lose this fight. They need to take out specifically a pick on something like the Widowmaker or the Zenyatta that you can dive away from the front line of Dallas's team, which they don't really get a chance to do with the way that Dallas is playing this composition and specifically the composition that they're running. So they're forcing very specific avenues that still favor, well, like I said, so in summary, I guess with this, they've mitigated the impact of Fusion snipers, whereas they've taken away basically every sight line and the few that they have. Seagull is able to deal with, and then you can rotate so that it's not an issue. You have made Fusion basically be unable to dive any target. They can try to dive the Rein or the Brigitte, but we've seen how effective Mickey's Brigitte has been, so good luck with that. So what we end up seeing is that after a minute of Fusion banging their head against a wall, they will swap off of the double sniper, and they will go over to classic, I can't say classic, but Mercy dive. So they'll go over to the Genji and the Tracer and basically waste 3 minutes trying to come up through here, getting picked by a Widowmaker en route, and then trying to actually fight battles on point where they will lose to, once again, this strong frontline presence that Dallas has to offer right now. So, and then EQO will try to blade and forgets that Brigitte exists, doesn't track her shield bash, and whoops. I guess I'm not being very concise here, but I apologize for that. So the one other thing that I'll talk about is strengths and weaknesses of this strategy. And I think this is very specifically a strategy that really only works against dive, the one that Fuel is running right now. This is one specifically where you've taken away targets that are diveable. You're taking advantage of the fact that Fusion doesn't have a front line that can actually take a dedicated fight versus another front line. And basically, if I'm Philadelphia Fusion going into this composition, the second that I see this and the way that they're playing this, I swap off to something like perhaps Ryan Zarya and a Brigitte or a triple tank composition, where you take out the weakness, or you take advantage of the weakness of this composition, which is that it has a fairly weak front line compared to everything that isn't dive. I think the way that you win against Fuel playing this composition is you just run tanks and you just steamroll Reinhardt and Brigitte here, take them out of the equation, and then you have a 6v4 or a 5v4 where you can clean up kind of all these other characters that aren't extremely strong on their own. There are things that come into play with that, but I think, like I said, this strategy that Dallas is running here is specifically tailored against the dive, the style of dive that Fusion plays, where they're looking for a pick from those, from the tracer or from the snipers that they're not going to get here. And this is the other thing, is that when they switch over to Tracer Genji, a very common thing on this map is for Tracer to go through here and then try to set up on a pick on something like, say, the Zenyatta or the Widowmaker. But they can no longer do that, because if Tracer tries to go through here, then he's going to get a nice fat stun from Mickey and die. So, not very concise, but just to summarize, Dallas runs a strategy specifically tailored for the dive that Fusion is going to be bringing against them, where against double sniper, they're able to take away not only the dive targets that, or hide the dive targets that that they have, but they take away sight lines from snipers, and then also prevent the tanks from Fusion being able to get into a good position to dive the diveable targets as a result of Reinhardt and Brigitte. Basically, Brigitte will be able to sustain Reinhardt against everything except perhaps a focused dive, which is maybe what Fusion needed to do here when they went over to Tracer Genji, is just go and just try to take out maybe the Reinhardt or the Brigitte first. But that's a job for a coach to worry about. That's all I have to say. Like I said, I'm not available this Saturday, but any feedback about my thought process or the way that I'm looking at this would be greatly appreciated. And if not, well, shit, I guess I still have to hang out with you because I'm one of your mods. So thanks for taking the time to watch this, and hope to hear from you soon, Jayne.